It's 2025 and the era of the girl boss is still upon us. These girl bosses are strong, smart, athletic, and certainly do not need love. My name is Dakota Sage, and don't get me wrong, I love a good, strong female character. Characters like Katniss Everdeen, Hermione Granger, Elle Woods, etc. But there's two main differences between these characters and the girl bosses that we're seeing today. One, they're fully fleshed out and not just one-dimensional, and two, they have love. And I'm not necessarily talking about romantic love, I'm talking about love in general. One of my favorite feminist movies of all time is of course Miss Congeniality, starring my queen, Sandra Bullock. So Miss Congeniality is basically a movie about a female FBI agent that has to go undercover in a beauty pageant because this beauty pageant is getting terroristic threats. Now there is a romantic plotline between Agent Gracie Hart and her coworker Eric Matthews, but this romantic storyline is not the main part of the movie. The real love story in this movie is how Agent Gracie Hart finds camaraderie with her fellow Miss America contestants, which helps her grow into a better agent and a better person. Legally Blonde is of course another example of a great feminist movie. Elle Woods starts out the movie as a one-dimensional kind of character that is only what everyone else wants her to be, specifically her boyfriend Warner. In the musical, there's even like a satirical line where when they think that Elle's gonna get engaged, they say like, oh, now you have worth because a man chose you. Elle goes to Harvard to pursue Warner, who doesn't want her, and along the way finds her own self-worth, self-love, and love of justice, which doesn't change her character, just enhances it. She's still very girly, she's still very kind, but now she's not using these things just to please other people, she's using them to help other people. Which is why I'm so confused about them making a series about her in high school, because literally none of her character development has happened yet, but whatever. Even modern Disney leads that are often marketed as they don't need love and they don't need a man, like Moana and Mirabel, are still driven by their love of their homes and families. I don't consider these characters girl bosses, even though they are stereotypically strong and not in a romantic relationship, but they are fully fleshed out complex characters instead of just one-dimensional, you know, I don't need a man sort of thing. These girl bosses are often hyper-independent and logical, and in the effort to distance them from romantic love, they end up detaching them from love and emotion completely. These women don't need any help, and they oftentimes only get involved in this situation because nobody else is going to do it, or nobody else has the skill set that they have. Now, I've said this a million times in my videos about the Hunger Games, but I felt like Katniss Everdeen sort of came off this way in the movies, especially in Mockingjay, because in the movies she was portrayed like this archetypal heroine who was inspiring the revolution by shooting arrows and taking no shit, but in the book, she was just a pawn being used by two different governments, and the real thing that inspired the people was that she was willing to do anything to keep the people that she loved safe. Then of course there was Snow and Coin's love of power. Coin is literally supposed to be the other side of the same coin in regards to Snow. They do this to Hermione Granger in the Harry Potter movies as well, where in the movies she's very much portrayed as like this girl boss and these boys wouldn't survive without her here. In the books, the relationship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione is very equal, but that's not portrayed in the movies. I talked a lot about it in my video about Ron Weasley, but what ended up happening was because they gave a lot of Ron's traits to Hermione, Ron was basically a character that didn't matter, and then they didn't know what to do with Ginny because Hermione was already perfect and they can't have like two perfect girl characters, so they just deleted her character entirely pretty much. But one character that I absolutely love that was hyper independent is Zoe Nightshade from Percy Jackson. Listen, Disney, I know I shit on you a lot, and I'm going to continue doing that throughout this video, but listen, give me a call. I'll be ready, I promise. So Zoe Nightshade first shows up in the book The Titan's Curse, where she's the hyper-independent first lieutenant of the Hunters of Artemis. She is standoffish, self-guarded, and very distrustful of other people, especially men. Also early in the book, Annabeth and Artemis go missing, and it's revealed that they've been captured by the Titan Atlas. So at this point, Zoe's like, okay, I'm gonna take a small group of hunters, the rest of you are gonna stay here and let me do my thing, because I do it right. The prophecy also says that two people are going to die on the quest. One will be lost in the land without rain, and I think one will be shed by the father's something. Somebody's gonna be killed by their dad. The campers obviously want to go save Annabeth, and there's a lot that kind of happens that ends up with the final core, but it ends up being Zoe, another hunter named Bianca, Thalia, Grover, and Percy on the quest. And Zoe is of course unhappy because her and Thalia don't like each other, and she also doesn't like Percy. But as the quest goes on and Zoe starts to connect more with the other group members and is forced to trust them, her character changes. She walks back her previous assumptions and learns that she can rely on other people, and that despite any hurt she felt in the past, loving others does not make her a fool. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call character development. But really, love is so necessary in storytelling because not only can it inspire an entire plot, but it also deepens the characters and enhances the story. These girl boss characters that are not emotionally invested in anything and are also perfect in every way are so different than actual people, so it makes us not be able to relate to them, but also not even like them most of the time. Even John Wick starts out with his beloved dog being killed and he wants revenge. That is emotional investment that we can relate to. Now, I'll be honest, I did clickbait a little bit by saying that every movie needs a love story, because that's not necessarily true, it's just true in almost every case. Like, a lot of horror movies are often motivated by fear and survival, but a lot of other ones are again motivated by love. Like The Last of Us is a zombie survival story, but a huge part of the story is his love for his daughter. But you know, again, being honest, I actually don't watch a lot of horror movies, but one horror series that I did watch was the Fear Street movies on Netflix, and they and the books that they're based off of are very, very heavy on the motivation of love. The villain's love for power, which is oftentimes the main motivator for villains, but also Dina's romantic love for Sam, familial love for her brother Josh, and her friends, and also shady side as a whole. There's also a lot of other examples of characters being motivated by love in this series, but I don't really want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen or read it. Or It, where the clown is literally defeated by the power of friendship, in the movie at least. I honestly wouldn't waste my time reading the book. But there's two movies that immediately come to my mind that are not motivated by love, and they are Black Swan and American Psycho. Both of these movies are about mentally ill people that are supposed to make you feel uneasy. You're not supposed to relate to them, it's supposed to be a warning, essentially. In Black Swan, the main character is motivated by fear and perfectionism, which leads to her breaking. And American Psycho is about a psychopath who kills people because it's the only time he ever feels something. I guess you could make the argument that the plot is driven by Nina's love of dance and Patrick Bateman's love of murder, but I'm gonna kind of lean towards the mental illness kind of part. Actually, I would say that in Black Swan's case, Nina's love of dance is a plot point rather than what the story is about, which leads me to Disney's live action Snow White. Dakota, what the hell kind of transition was that? You're gonna see. You're gonna see, because it is directly connected. In one of her infamous interviews, Rachel Zegler talks about how, unlike the original, the new Snow White is not about the love story at all, and then alludes to the fact that Snow White might find love along the way in addition to the rest of the storyline. This is not revolutionary in literally any way, because Disney's 1937 Snow White is not a romantic love story. It just includes a romantic love story. Supposedly, in the original Snow White, they were going to include the prince more in the story, but they weren't really exactly sure how to animate him, and they were kind of on a time crunch and didn't have the time to figure it out. But even if the prince wasn't present in the story at all, the evil queen would still love power and feel threatened by Snow White. She would still send the huntsman out to kill her. Snow White would still flee into the woods and meet the dwarves. Snow White and the dwarves would still become friends and platonically love each other. The queen would still give her the poison apple, and the dwarves would still be so devastated by Snow White's death that they go to get revenge on the queen. The most important love story in this movie is between Snow White and the dwarves. She just happens to find romantic love amidst all this, and then that romantic love interest then wakes her up with a kiss at the end. But based on what we've seen, the live action probably doesn't plan on developing the dwarves and their relationship to Snow White at all. I mean, they already removed the prince from the storyline entirely in the live action, but they just replaced it with a different romantic love story. Realistically, they could have just removed it entirely, and then with the queen's death have that break all the spells across the land, waking Snow White up instead of true love's kiss. I just think in efforts to make Snow White stronger, Disney has in turn created a much weaker storyline. I can only say so much because the movie hasn't come out yet, but going from the sweet Snow White that we see at the beginning of the trailer to a complete 180 with hardened revolutionary Snow White that we also see in the trailer, in the span of a single movie, doesn't seem like character development, it seems like bad writing. Or more likely, rewrites at the beginning to be more like the original that don't quite fit into this new storyline. And I'm just gonna tie this in because I was gonna make a separate video about this that goes more in depth, but it does fit in very well with this one. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, Disney entered the Renaissance with releases like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. And the reason why these movies are categorized away from the earlier ones is because they're much more theatrical and cinematic. The songs were much bigger, oftentimes utilizing ensembles and being in a much more Broadway fashion, and the movies were longer with more developed characters and storylines. And this is the magic formula that Disney is still utilizing today. That's why Lin-Manuel Miranda has had such success writing for these movies. But back before this, Disney movies were much gentler, and the songs oftentimes followed the style of that time. Like in the 30s, Snow White sings very high-pitched like other popular cartoons of the time, and then in 1950, Cinderella sings much more smooth. So when they developed the live-action Cinderella movie, they had Lily James sing very similarly to Eileen Woods, who voiced the original Cinderella. But the live-action Cinderella and the original Cinderella are very similar. It just uses things like set design and costumes to enhance the story even further. But when it comes to the live-action Snow White, not only is the costuming and the CGI awful, but the character and the storyline itself are fundamentally different. And I think Disney saw the high-pitched singing from the original and said, no, that's too feminine and too weak, so they had Rachel Zegler sing as more grand, powerful, and Broadway. And you can hate Rachel Zegler all you want, but the girl can sing, and she can sing these big, grand, powerful songs, but she can also sing these really high-pitched notes like they're nothing, which to me is much more powerful because not everybody can do that. Even when watching The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I actually wish that Rachel Zegler would sing higher because it's so much more captivating, more like how Lucy Gray was described in the book. But at least she can sing and they don't have to auto-tune a literal Disney princess. They gave up Emmy Rossum, an actual opera singer, for somebody that can't even get rid of their English accent when they sing because she was popular with the fans. And don't come after me, because anybody that's ever taken a singing lesson or been in a choir of some sort knows that there's a certain way that you pronounce words while you sing, and saying your R's is one of them. Unless it's stylistic like with the band Blur. I remember being in the 6th grade and my chorus teacher being like, "It's not Christmas, it's Christmas." Long story short, feminine and weak are not synonyms, and love is often the source of our greatest strength. But that's it for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, have a great rest of your day.